Welcome to Idaho Fishing Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fishing Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
Yep. No, I've boned up on my podcasts on the weekend a little bit.
Good. So you learned how to talk?
Yeah. We'll see. I learned how to listen to podcasts.
Oh.
Which one were you boning up on?
I was boning up on Hook and Bulletin, of course.
Oh, nice.
And then the Ranch podcast. Do you listen to that one?
Yeah, local guy.
Yeah.
It's interesting. His thing has been, like, in his description, it's politics, schools, fishing game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah, he's definitely in. And I don't think he doesn't act like he knows or has an agenda about any of them. It's just, it's a fair conversation all the way around.
Yeah, yeah.
Which one of those three would you talk about?
Schools?
Yeah, schools.
Yeah. Well, we are here in Boise, Idaho at headquarters office with none other than our director, Jim Fredericks. Jim, welcome.
Good morning, Connor. Glad to be here, Ben.
And who else we got here?
I'm staying
Staying out of this one?
incognito.
All right. Well, we also got Ben Bieri, who you know by now, our digital content specialist, and a special cameo from Roger Phillips, who doesn't even have headphones on.
We'll try and keep him quiet.
He's over here hanging out.
I'll remain relatively silent and try and keep the director out of trouble.
Yeah, wave me off, Roger, if you need to.
He's been known to pop off on occasion. Unlike me, so we should be okay.
I got the beep and the mute button here at the ready, Roger.
Good.
But yeah, we're gonna have some a cool conversation with our director today. Cover a lot of different topics, and yeah. So Jim, you want to start off? Tell us a bit about yourself and where did you come from?
I came from actually Idaho. So I grew up in northern Idaho, went to high school in Moscow, went to the University of Idaho, grew up not unlike a lot of other folks in the agency.
There's another one.
There's another one.
Yeah.
Put it on the board.
Okay.
We're going to start leaving scratch tally marks on the sides of the microphone.
For every University of Idaho graduate that we have a conversation with.
Oh, okay, yeah, go Vandals. So I thought you were going to say that the cliche part about what I'm about to say is that spent most of my time outside hunting, fishing, and trapping as a kid. So yeah, not particularly unique in that regard with as far as our agency goes. The unique part, if there is one, was when I got out of high school, I went to U of I, like I said, and got my degree in psychology.
Oh.
So yeah, that was a road less traveled.
Yeah.
And then I worked in a psych hospital back in Maine for a year and was drawn back there by the woman that eventually became my wife and spent a year there and was fully intending to go to graduate school in psychology and get my PhD and be a clinical psychologist for my life.
Oh,
holy cow.
I've got lots of other questions then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just kicked open the
He's
door.
gonna
Yeah.
flip the script and start asking us a bunch of questions.
Can I put my feet up?
Do we need a couch here for you?
Yeah,
I'm
let's move over to Jim's
comfortable
office.
enough to just start talking and telling you things, and I would like some answers, really.
We'll see what we can do. So then I convinced my wife, since I spent a year back there in Maine. She's from originally New Jersey and went to college in Maine, so that's kind of the main attraction, so to speak. And boom. And so then convinced her to come out to Idaho for a year to see if she liked it, because at that point I suppose it was, at least I was telling her that, you know, we could either live back east or live in Idaho. We'd just see where we both collectively liked it most.
Yeah.
And I was dreading the idea that she did not like the West, because as much as I liked Maine, I did not want to live on the East Coast. So came out here, and she went to school at U of I to get her master's in teaching. And I was working in a psych hospital down in Lewiston, again, getting ready to go to graduate school in psych. And I have a good friend who works for the department that was preparing to go to graduate school for fisheries at University of Idaho. And I came back from a long and not particularly satisfying evening at the psych hospital, and I realized that I was way more excited about my friend's future and working for a natural resource agency, particularly Fish and Game, than I was my own. So I tossed and turned all night, and as I tell the story, I went to bed a psych major and woke up a fisheries major.
Just like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of agonizing in between, but yeah. it was a turning point of essentially 12 hours.
Wow.
So then I felt like when you get out of college and you've invested 4 years into a degree, I think at that age you kind of sense that the die is cast. I mean, this is the road I've chosen, and there's no turning back. And like I say, it was agonizing. And I went down and met with a professor, Dave Bennett, at University of Idaho, and kind of expected him to say that, no, it's too late. You're a lost cause. And
I was wondering if do you have to start all over?
Well, yeah, and no. The good news was no, I didn't. And Dave did not say I was a lost cause. He said absolutely. And psychology is actually, there's a lot of value to a degree like that. A lot of, as I think everybody in this room knows, a lot of what we do is working with people, and as much as working with fish and wildlife. So to answer your question, Ben, I had to take about 3 semesters worth of hard science courses. I had not taken chemistry or really advanced biology to that point. So psychology is a little bit of a softer science. And so had to catch up on that. And then I did well enough that I was accepted to go to graduate school there. And so then I was off to the races.
Wow. Off to the raceways?
Off to the races. Nice. Another one.
So you had never even squeezed a fish up until that point. And you're what now, 22, 23, and starting down that path?
Yeah, and to be clear, I'd squeezed a lot of fish on the end of my fishing
Yeah,
rest.
he said he spent most of the time outside.
Yeah. So it was in my blood, but no. As far as doing anything for seasonal work or thinking about it as a career, no, not at all. And so during those semesters when I was picking up that coursework, I was fortunate to be able to get a seasonal job for Fish and Game up in the Panhandle in Coeur d'Alene. And that's when I really felt like this was unquestionably the right choice for me.
What did that job entail?
So I was initially hired to do a creel survey on the Spokane River. It was a partnership with Avista, back then Washington Water Power, and spent a lot of my time just checking anglers and getting catch rates and assessing that fishery. And so that was fun. But then I got a little bit more broad experience. The friend that I told you about earlier, he was working there as well. And so he was a technician, and we were on a pretty long leash. We were allowed to just, not allowed, we were assigned to go out and do electrofishing surveys on the lateral lakes, the chain lakes up in off of Coeur d'Alene Lake, to do bass surveys. And so we would go out just as the sun was setting and spend all night electrofishing, catching big bass and working them up, measuring them, weighing them, collecting scale samples. And it was too good to be true. One of my best friends and I out doing that. What's not to love?
Yeah.
So a good variety of work in those summer sessions, enough to know that this is super interesting work and puts me outside a lot, and I got to squeeze a lot of fish.
Nice.
So how long were you in the Fisheries Bureau before you jumped to the sport coat?
So I started as a research biologist and then went to be a regional biologist, a management biologist. And I did that for about 6 years.
Was that up north also?
That was up north, yeah, exactly, in the Panhandle region. And then I was promoted to be a fish manager in Idaho Falls. So I did that for about 7 years, and then went back to the Panhandle to be a fish manager. And so collectively, that was a little over 20 years. And then I applied to be the chief of fisheries down here. And I guess you'd say that's when I put on the sport coat and maybe took off the waders. I still have waders and get them on from time to time.
Yeah,
but,
you just don't have to wear them as part of your day job anymore.
Yeah, pretty true. I wear the coat more than the waders now.
Would you ever wear the coat with the waders?
I have not to date.
I think that's a great picture, and that's the picture we should put up.
Yep.
To promote this podcast.
So I have to jump in here for a second. How often do you call up your old buddy and go, "Hey, this is Director Fredericks. How's your career going there, Dave?"
Yeah. He does. He still sees me as his buddy.
Good. That's fantastic.
He doesn't buy the director thing.
Was it, I mean, having grown up in North Idaho, was it nice were you like jonesing to get out of North Idaho for some of that work, or have you always felt really partial to sticking around?
That's a funny question. No, as I think a lot of folks that live in Idaho know, North Idaho is a very different feel. It feels in some ways like a different state than the rest of Idaho. But growing up there, I thought North Idaho was Idaho, right? And the rest of it is whatever. I mean, I had essentially, the only reason I had been south of the Salmon River through high school was to come to track and cross country meets. So my family didn't come to Boise, or we didn't go to eastern Idaho for vacation. We went more north or over to the coast. So literally the first time that I went to Idaho Falls I take it back. I went to a American Fishery Society conference there. But aside from that, the first time I went to Idaho Falls was when I moved there. And very different feel.
Yeah.
But I absolutely loved it. It was we had two young boys at the time, and what a great place to spend several years.
Yeah. Was that your first taste of like mule deer hunting country, or had you kind of gone outside of the Panhandle before that?
Well, now we have good mule deer in northern Idaho, Connor. Remember that.
But your thumbnail is you holding a whitetail. So I want to.
Yeah. No, I was more of a whitetail hunter. That's true. And yes, that's the first time that I really got into mule deer hunting in the way that most people in Idaho think about it.
Okay. Yeah. He looks at me.
Well, I will tell you that back then. So in the mid to late '80s, I mean, we had, of course, it was. The heyday for mule deer in southern and eastern Idaho, central Idaho, but northern Idaho as well. And there were some, if I had it to do over again, I would have spent a little less time chasing whitetails around in those days and realized that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to find some really nice mule deer bucks. And I'm talking about the Panhandle, and there's still some good bucks up there, but it is not like it was.
Boy, you're making Roger really happy over here. When you were younger, though, who were some of your role models that may have played a part in making that transition from psychology to fisheries? Well, aside from your buddy.
Yeah, aside from my buddy. So once I got into grad school, it was just really kind of changed. Well, that's where I felt like I really found my people, put it that way. There was a really good set of folks that were all kind of in the same boat together. We were all about the same age. We were all kind of embarking on our careers, and we had a wide variety of different studies going on. We all helped each other out, and we learned a lot from each other. I learned as much from some of my fellow graduate students, the PhD students in particular, as I did from professors. So it was just a really enriching experience. And then when I was doing the seasonal work in the Panhandle, I had a mentor, the biologist that I worked for, just a really good guy. And I think that's one of the strengths of our agency is the mentorship that we have. But he took an interest in us as individuals and talked about financial not just stuff about fisheries management, but he talked about financial management and saving money and how to think about your career.
Life.
He talked about life. Yeah, exactly. And that, I learned so much from that. And then I've had a series of mentors. Chip Corsi was a strong mentor for me throughout my career. And people that saw you for what they thought you could be, when maybe you didn't see that yourself. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's such an important part of being a mentor.
Absolutely. There's, you mentioned this a little bit already, just the tie from the psychology part. And then it sounds like there was enough that went into the career also that kind of fed that part of your brain also. Was just being around the other people, and there was some other people in your life that just kept that, I don't want to say fuel going, but just kept stimulating that part of your brain.
Yeah, right. I think as I got, I mean, I'm a social person by nature for the most part. I certainly do like my quiet time and my private time, but I like working with people. And one of the things that really drives me is helping people understand other perspectives, which is one of the biggest challenges that we have in this agency, right? Because if you surround yourself with people that think a season ought to be, whatever, these 3 weeks, and don't ever hear from people that see it differently, then of course that's the truth, right? And being able to see people get in a room and hear others' perspectives, that's just really rewarding to me. Because if our job would be extremely easy if everybody really did just see it
everybody
through one
agreed,
lens, right?
yeah.
Right. But most of the decisions we make not most, but certainly an awful lot of them, about half of the people support that decision, and the other half would like to see something different. And so that just makes it for a very challenging job, because by definition, you're going to be disappointing maybe half of the people.
Yeah. And there's not a topic that we don't push out and ask for public input on. That you're absolutely right, that there's a lot of people that love what we're doing, and a lot of people that would wish we would do it a different way, or something that probably just fits how they want it done that day.
Right.
You know?
And I think at the very high level, and this is kind of what we lose sight of from time to time, at the very high level, we have complete agreement from the people that we serve. It's when you get into the details of how do you want your season structured. I mean, everybody likes the idea of lots of opportunity, right? And so the general ideas, we have very strong support.
What are some of the biggest priorities that you are working or that you see with Fish and Game, and that you're tackling as director?
Well, so I think one of the things that we're wrestling with now is, growth, right? Yeah. I mean, Idaho is one of the fastest growing states, and that comes with some good things, but it comes with a lot of challenges. Yeah. And so there's a lot related to that, and we could talk about growth and the implications for a long time, but I'll start with hunting. I mean, there's this perception that there are a lot more people in the woods now, particularly for things like mule deer, and there are fewer mule deer than there were, like I was just saying a bit ago, in the 1980s. So people recall. I mean, our nature is to recall the best times that we've had and want those duplicated, right? So our benchmark is generally not the average day. The benchmark that people expect and want is their best day. Yeah. So our work is cut out for us there, because when you combine resources that aren't what they were for a variety of reasons, and more people competing for those resources, that's a real challenge. And so I think related to that is this sense that we have crowding issues with hunting. And
real quick, where do we get that sense from folks that there's crowding? Is it on social media? Is it public comment opportunities? Is it surveys? All of the above? Where are we hearing that folks feel like there's
a lot of emails right directly to Jim?
No, I get a few like that. I think it's all of the above.
Okay.
I think it's all of the above. And to be clear, there are places where crowding is an issue. So I don't want to downplay that. The flip side is, if you look at the total number of hunters in Idaho over the last 30 years, it really is, and I'm talking about deer and elk hunters, it really is fairly constant. I mean, it has its ups and downs, and when deer populations are good, it goes up, and when deer populations are down, it goes down, but it really does track. And the other part of it is that our inclination, our knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, there's so many non-residents now, and what are we going to do about that? And In 2021, we shifted the way we're managing non-residents and tried to kind of spread them out more evenly, and hoping that would address a lot of the problem. And I think that did help. That did kind of even it out. But I wouldn't say that really solved the issue or put that whole concern about non-residents to bed. Mm-hmm. Anything but. Yeah. I think we continue to hear more concerns about non-residents. And here's the interesting thing about that, though, is that the number of non-residents has not changed for decades. We allocate, or we have a quota of non-resident elk tags of 12,815 and 15,500 deer tags. That hasn't changed. So the idea that we've got more and more non-residents pouring into the state is a bit of a misconception. Mm-hmm. Again, to acknowledge that crowding, that there are places where you do see more of them, we have lost a lot of access to private land that people, back in the 80s took for granted, whether it be corporate timberland, whether it be just private ranch land. There was a lot more access to that. And so there's less land available to residents and non-residents. And then obviously the distribution of elk has changed, certainly since I've been elk hunting in Idaho. Yeah. The backcountry areas that used to soak up a lot of elk hunters, there's not much going on there now. So there's the perception of crowding, and then there's some reality to that, just the way the distribution of animals and accessible lands and hunters go.
Do you think that perception will remain consistent for the foreseeable future? Like, do you see that changing much? That's an interesting question. I think the short answer is no. I don't think any state has ever gotten to the point where hunters say, this is great, it's not crowded. Unless you restrict it to the point where you've lost, most of your opportunity. Yeah. So, and there have certainly been states that do manage very conservatively that way through controlled hunts, and you simply don't get to hunt elk or deer every year. So, it is that trade-off. And would you rather see more people than you want to see, but you still get to go out, or would you rather only be able to hunt elk every other year or every third year and maybe have it more to yourself? Yeah. And in Idaho, what we consistently hear is, I want my opportunity.
Yeah. And what does that opportunity look like? Just, I want to be able to hunt every single year.
Yeah, essentially, yes. That's one thing. When we were talking earlier about the broad things that Idahoans agree on, and that is one of them, is I want to be able to hunt every year. Yeah. And, when I was a fish manager, we used to talk about more theoretical. We didn't really go down the road because it's impractical. But when you hear complaints about crowding on the St. Joe River, Pickett River, would there be an appetite for limited access like you do with river floats, like the Forest Service does with floats in some areas? And again, what we've heard from Idahoans is no. I want to be able to go fish that water whenever.
Yeah. In your work, do you work with other agencies or talk to other directors about maybe some of the similar trajectories that they've taken with this, like a similar problem where maybe they were an opportunity state and now they've gone to, have they discussed maybe going back?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we talk a lot about, various perspectives and the different challenges and social expectations we have in our own states. I haven't really engaged in a conversation about opportunity versus crowding, and if there's a big movement to go one direction or another. I think one of the things that we have very abundant resources in Idaho, and so some of the states around us, they're just not really in a position to be able to afford that opportunity that we can.
Yeah. I guess a follow-up question too would be, are we alone in Idaho seeing the quote-unquote congestion problems, or is that seen in other Western states as well?
Oh, that's absolutely seen in other Western states. If you look at how other and oftentimes that focus is on non-residents, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at how other states manage non-residents, it's pretty restrictive for the most part.
Do you think that's a trend nationally? A lot more people are interested in hunting and fishing. That those numbers start to go up. That it becomes more destinational and like people are spending more and more of their vacation time from back east in the West.
Yes.
In pursuit of.
I think that's exactly what it is. If you look at the overall number of hunters in the country, no, that's not increasing. But if you look at the people that have the means and the interest in taking time to come out to Western states, I think it looks a lot different than it used to.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back really quick because you mentioned the access issue. Is that back in the 80s and 90s when you were kind of referring to when there was more access on private land specifically? Was there more of a willingness then from landowners back then as there is now?
Yeah, I think that's a fair general statement. I think that because things were more community oriented, and I think landowners knew the hunters more, and we have a lot more new people in the state.
Yeah.
And I realize I'm kind of contradicting myself because I said we overall don't have more deer and elk hunters. It goes up and down, but I think in terms of the use of private lands or the demand to be on private lands, there's more of it now by people that landowners just don't know. And there's abuse of that. So, and I'm not just saying that it's hunters, but there are people off on private lands ATVing and doing all sorts of things that I think it just at some point it just wears down on the tolerance of landowners to deal with that.
Sure.
I drove south of Kuna on Sunday, and I was kind of shocked. It wasn't a great day. It was windy, overcast. I was shocked how many people were out recreating one way or another, whether they were fishing the snake, shooting guns along Swan Falls, four-wheeling, ATV, hiking. There was so many people. It kind of made me stop and think like, oh, there. To your point about growth, there's just so many more folks here, and again, our resources are abundant to go do all of those things to recreate. So growth is one thing. What are some other priorities that you guys have or are paying attention to or see as priority?
Yeah, so I think habitat management, of course, we're not directly habitat managers. We have wildlife management areas where we manage the habitat, obviously, but in large part, we're partners with the federal agencies, BLM and Forest Service, and then, of course, private landowners. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that comes with growth, of course, is development and the loss of a lot of those habitats that are extremely important, not just for access, but also for fish and wildlife populations. And so, looking outside here at Boise at the foothills, we've got one of the most important winter ranges with one of the largest deer herds that literally you can, look out the window and you can see that. The city butts right up against this important habitat. And so how do we work with private landowners, work with federal agencies to maintain that, keep the connectivity to between summer range and winter range, and ensure that the winter ranges and summer ranges are healthy. And so development is part of that. Invasive species are a big part of that, and then energy development as well. So those are all major challenges, and I think we positioned ourselves and continue to position ourselves to do well there, but. There's never there. You never solve that issue.
No,
right?
It's always changing.
It's always changing.
Yeah. Another objective that the director's office and Fish and Game has been working on is the hunting and technology working group. What are, as the name implies, what are some of the challenges of facing technology that we're trying to tackle?
Yeah, so I think there are technologies now that none of us would have been able to imagine 20 or 30 years ago.
Like what?
Well, the ability to shoot a mile. And I guess I shouldn't say nobody would imagine that because,
I'm sure people dreamed of it.
people dreamed of it, and we had
tried.
We had military people that were capable of doing that, but it wasn't mainstream by any stretch. Yeah. And so, growing up, there was kind of an accepted norm standard, at least in my circle, that 300 yards was the extent of where you'd shoot with a rifle. And that's certainly not the case anymore. There are people that are very capable at 500, 600, 700 yards. And for those people that have the weapons and that spend the time on the range, great. But it does change how we need to think about management, right? Yeah. So, the long range shooting is kind of the obvious one that jumps out. But things like thermal imaging binoculars, I've had the opportunity to look through those, and boy, that is a game changer, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, growing up in North Idaho, again, hunting whitetails, if you go out on a typical November day when whitetails are rutting and there's no snow on the ground, the sky is often gray, the woods are gray, and you're looking for a gray deer, right? and so your eyes hurt and you have a headache by the end of the day when you're doing it, and you're looking for tiny movements. You're just looking for a flick of an ear. Hopefully you're seeing deer on the move, but a lot of times they're feeding and you're just looking for something that doesn't quite look right. Well, thermal imaging binoculars, you pull that up and there's a giant red deer in the middle of the clear cut or the forest. And so is that fair? Is that fair chase? I won't answer that question, but I think this is a really important time and opportunity for the public to engage in that discussion about where do you draw that line, and then how do you enforce it as well? What's fair? What do people consider fair chase? What's practical? Yeah. So those are a couple of things. Obviously, drones. I mean, drones weren't a thing. Yeah. And certainly weren't a thing even 10 years ago that was affordable to you and me. Right. So how do you manage that? Not just for, I think people are in pretty much agreement in terms of how you would manage that for scouting animals. That I don't think people support that. What about game recovery though? Yeah. Is it a legitimate way for is it a legitimate tool for game recovery? That's an open question.
E-bikes in the woods.
E-bikes in the woods. Yeah. I just I told you I do listen to Cal's Weekend Review from time to time. Interesting podcast, but talking about robo pants. Did you hear that one? Yeah, right. So pants that have literally put a spring in your step and make it 30% easier to get to the top of them. They're battery powered.
Is that their actual slogan, or did you just come up with that?
What?
Put a spring in your step.
Trademark it.
I might. Yeah, I might.
Yeah, I was like, that's brilliant. If it's not already been in use. Are you going to buy some of those?
Oh, I have like 6 pair. No, nice. I'm kidding.
He wears them with his jacket.
Early adopter. Yeah. He has his jacket, his robo pants, and his waders.
Do you own any camo blazers?
I don't. No, I just got back from a meeting and somebody had a camo blazer that I was kind of envious of. So, okay. But no, to date I do not have one. I have some.
What's going on over there?
The coffee pot's going off.
Oh, it's growling. Yeah. Sorry, Jim.
We can unplug that.
Might have to.
Yeah.
Nice job. So continuing with the hat working group, what are some ways that we've reached out and engaged the public for their thoughts on technology and hunting and fair chase?
Right. Yeah. So kind of 3 components to that as we have this conversation about technology, and the reason that we're doing it right now, and this kind of gets into the weeds, the technocrat piece of it, but we have the technology that we allow in hunting is defined by administrative rule. And for the process nerds would know that we have several chapters of rule which is different than statute. Statute is laws, and then the agencies have the ability to develop administrative rules, which do need to be approved by the legislature, so they have the power of law. But we are going through Chapter 8 this year, and Chapter 8 is where a lot of this technology stuff lives. So now is the time to have the discussion about do we want to take a look at restrictions on thermal imaging binoculars or remote trail cameras, all that kind of stuff. So that's what prompted this. So when we decided to put together the hat, we formed that group, but then we also did a broad public survey just to get give everybody the opportunity to express their opinions on what's fair chase and where we ought to be with technology. And we used the results of that survey. We provided that to the hat group so that they could see this is kind of what we know what you think, you know what you think, but here's what we hear from the broader public.
Gotcha.
So then the next step of that will be to take the recommendations of the hat group to the commission, and then we start that formal rulemaking process. And when we do the formal rulemaking process, which is over the next several months, the public again has the opportunity to weigh in on whatever proposed rules we come up with.
Okay.
And then the hat group also, I mean, there's the rules or the rule ideas, rule recommendations that they might advance. And then there's also that we've invited them to provide suggestions on how to manage this going forward. So we don't want to put together a hat group every 2 years, right? Because this stuff is changing very rapidly. So do we have kind of a process or some sort of guidelines on how to address some of these technological questions as they come up?
Is there something similar for fisheries?
The fisheries deals with it a little less, but right now there is a raging conversation going on nationally about forward-facing sonar, because that has really become a game changer certainly in some states, in Idaho to a degree, but in other states are very concerned about it because you can pull up to a point and you can very easily see how many fish are there, what species they are, how big they are. So it's a lot different than just kind of looking at blips on the old cheaper fish finders.
Yeah.
Is that would an example? Would that be like the live scopes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So they're great, if you have one. Not so great if you don't.
Yeah.
And I think there's that balance. There's an argument that if you want one, get one, but not everybody can afford that.
Yeah.
And then, so I think that you really have to back it out to, okay, what is it doing to catch rates and fisheries management? And I think some of the states that have looked into this find that overall it's not necessarily changing harvest rates, but people are spending less time fishing dead water, so to speak. They spend more time looking for fish.
Yeah.
Because they'll pull up to a point, and if there's nothing there, they're going to go to the next point. Where you and I, assuming you don't have a live scope, Connor, we
do not.
We'd probably spend 15 or 20 minutes casting there before we moved on, and so. I think,
or 45,
or 45.
I think even with a live scope, I could spend 15 or 20 minutes and still not catch anything.
I'd spend 15 or 20 minutes just setting the darn thing up.
Yeah.
So it's more efficient then.
It's more efficient, but I think people do spend more time running around looking if they have that tool.
Yeah. And
less time fishing, so to speak. So it's not just as clear cut as if you have one, you're going to end up catching 3 times as many fish in the day, because you may, but you may spend a lot of time running around looking too.
And I assume you mean all types of fishing, not just ice fishing.
Yeah, definitely all types of fishing. Less in rivers, but
Sure.
but still in rivers. I mean, you can pull into a deep hole and see if there's a sturgeon there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
speaking of fishing, what are some of the priorities from a fisheries level that we are currently working on statewide or regional too, if there are some regional projects that are big foundational priorities for the department?
Yeah, we've built up a habitat program over the years, and I think we have a lot of opportunities to invest in, whether it be in anadromous waters, salmon and steelhead waters, or resident fish waters, to improve habitat and improve densities of trout or salmon or other species. So that's definitely a high priority, and I think has been and will continue to be a real achievement and accomplishment of the agency. I think from a fisheries management standpoint, Idaho has really been on the forefront of some great research that has really set the standard for how fisheries are managed in a lot of the country. We pioneered, for example, using sterile trout, and where we want to offer catchable rainbow trout fishing, catchables being the 10 to 12 inch fish that we take out of the hatchery truck and they're ready to be caught. Where we want to be able to stock those fish, but we have, say, cutthroat trout or native fish that are in the area that we don't want the rainbows to hybridize with. This is years ago, but we developed a program where all the rainbow trout that we stock would be sterile. And that's really been a game changer for not just how we manage fish in this state, but how others do too. And we've done, one of the real signatures, I guess you would say, of this agency is how we've used the research program. We've dedicated a lot of our funding, our federal aid funding, to a research program to inform fisheries management. And so that was an example. We've done magnum trout stocking, which essentially, rather than stock 10-inch fish and more of them, we tested to see whether if we stock 12-inch fish, people like them better because they're bigger, obviously. But the cool thing about it is they actually get caught at a higher rate. So you can stock fewer fish and they're 12 inches, but they come back, but more anglers actually end up catching fish. So I didn't say that very well, but you can stock a smaller number of fish, but still have a larger number of fish be caught by anglers. And, oh, by the way, they're 12 inches instead of 10. So good all the way around. So that's been an innovative program, a really good program.
How do we determine whether we use one or the other of those programs? Is it just based on the fishery? Is it based on what the public is asking for?
It's in some places where we have really high, what we call return to the creel or catch rates of those hatchery fish, like a lot of the urban ponds that we have here in the Treasure Valley. If we know that the majority of those are going to be caught, whether they be 12 or 10 inches, then we can't afford to stock more 10 inchers. So we do that.
Okay.
In other places where the return to the creel is a little more marginal, then that's where we've really seen a benefit of stocking these larger fish.
Gotcha. We've addressed a lot of the challenges, but what are some of the wins that you've seen as your time as director, and even maybe prior to that?
Well, so I touched on a couple of on the fisheries management side wins, and I'll go back to some of the benefits of that research program and wins, to answer your question. One of the things that Idaho has really pushed on is not closing down streams like in the summertime when water temperatures are warm.
Okay.
So other states have done that with the idea that in warm water temperatures, fish get stressed. You're going to have a higher release mortality rate because of that stress in the warmer water. So we did a pretty extensive research program to look at catch rates and then also the survival rates of fish that are caught in those warmer water temperatures. And essentially, the research showed that you don't have a biological benefit of closing down those streams because, again, the fish stop feeding actively and fish congregate to where there's colder water. So that broad brush approach really is taking away opportunity for no real biological gain. So those types of research programs, along with a couple of the others that I just mentioned, I think are real wins for this agency. So lots of other wins. I think in terms of the innovation of the people that we have working here, we have pioneered and set the stage for a lot of good management that expands beyond the borders of Idaho. So our population monitoring programs that we have in the wildlife shop, and I'll use wolves. I know wolves are controversial, but managing wolves requires a good understanding of the population of those animals, and there weren't good methodologies for estimating wolf populations in the state. And so our folks developed this remote trail camera program. And initially that was just to try to identify where on the landscape we had wolves. Not how many, but just the distribution of wolves. Okay. And then through some complicated statistical modeling, they refined that program to where we had a camera grid, we call it, throughout the state that can not only tell you where we have them, but it actually can tell you how many we have. And it's called the space to event model. And Shane and the wildlife folks can explain that much better. And we have videos about it, but
another podcast for another day.
There
I
you
wrote
go.
it down.
There you go. But then as the wolf population started to decline, we knew that camera-based methodology wasn't going to be as effective, because as densities of wolves and the distribution of wolves gets less, that becomes less reliable. So then they developed this program, this project that's looking at the genetics of our harvested wolves, and this gets really complicated. If you think the camera-based thing is complicated, this is more so. But you can take the genetic relatedness of all of the wolves that we've harvested, and I need to back up and just note that every wolf that gets harvested in the state since the beginning of wolf harvest, we take a tooth out of it. So we know the age of that wolf, and that tooth has genetic material in it.
Gotcha.
So we know the age and the genetic relatedness of the wolves that we have in the harvest, and then by this complicated modeling piece, you can extrapolate what did the population at large look like that this sample of harvested wolves with this genetic relatedness came from. And that's incredibly innovative and incredibly powerful. And because we had been doing this, collecting teeth going back in time, we were able to run population estimates and compare those estimates with the camera-based estimates that we'd had for 4 years. And lo and behold, they line up almost exactly. So it really validates both of these methods, and so I think it positions us very well going forward. And the really cool thing about this, it's all cool, but the really cool thing is that those two methods use entirely different data sets. They don't use any of the same data to arrive at a population estimate, and yet both of those methods bring you back to essentially the same number.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And that stuff doesn't just happen. I mean, that comes from incredibly sharp minds thinking about really difficult problems, and we have that in this agency.
I was going to ask, is that something that was developed in this agency, or pieced together and then really curated?
It was the whole. It's called approximate Bayesian computation.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
We were just talking about that yesterday.
I bet you were. I bet you were. So we didn't invent that, but it had never been used in this manner to estimate a population.
Got it.
What was it called again?
I said it once. I probably didn't get it right.
So it's been more refined, or
Yes. It is
continually
a tool
refined
that we have adapted to our question
through our staff.
through our staff. Yes. And we're expecting and hoping that will be peer reviewed soon, and it'll be a tool that I would expect is going to be used much more broadly.
Yeah.
Is it something that is only used on wolves, or can it be applied to other wildlife species that are more dispersed?
Yeah, so I did ask that question of our wildlife folks, and yes and no. I mean, wolves lend themselves to it well because of their pack structure and the genetic relatedness. I asked if we could use it on black bears, for example, and possible. It's just it isn't quite the same because you don't have the same genetic structure in a bear population that you do in a wolf population.
Right. A little more of a solitary animal than
exactly,
the wolf.
Exactly. And
Just real quick, how many wolves have you seen in your time in Idaho?
I've seen like 4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Roger, have you ever seen a wolf? 3.
And then, tracks. So for years I had hound dogs and went out in the winter looking for mountain lions. And so that's when you're not so excited to see wolf tracks, but I've seen lots and lots and lots of wolf tracks.
What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I think one of the things I would also celebrate is just I've been blown away in my time here at the staff that we have. I've had several different jobs where they're just jobs. That's not the attitude here. It's you talked about your mentor, like the work we do is somewhat some of the easier stuff we do, but there's also life on top of that. I like to proselytize our staff and say, like, it's not people that are here because it's a job. It's people that are actually passionate about the things they do. They've gone to school. They've put in the time.
They went to U of I.
They all went to U of I. I think that's one thing I would just like to celebrate with you is this staff here is amazing. And I would imagine, and you can agree with this or disagree, like Idaho's got to be the pinnacle for a person in management, wildlife management. Like, to get here, you've made it.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you at all. I think the staff that we have here, like you say, for most of us, it's and whether you work in the administration bureau, the enforcement bureau, fish or wildlife bureaus, the engineering bureau, or the communications bureau, there's a passion for fish and wildlife conservation and outdoor recreation that makes this heart work for most of us. And you don't find that in every workplace, to your point. So there's that. But then because of the resources that we have, and I would say because of the culture of this agency, we attract and we do retain people at a very, very high rate, and not just from Idaho. I mean, like I said, I'm from Idaho. I grew up here, so have an appreciation for that. But we have the majority of people that work for this agency didn't necessarily come from Idaho. We have. Well, let me ask you, like, who all grew up in Idaho in this room?
None of us.
Okay.
Not me.
Okay, well, case in point. Okay, and you're forgiven. But
we're just going to cut all that out.
Isn't Jim special? He's from Idaho.
Jeez, what a flex.
Actually, it leads to my point, which is that because of the resources we have and because this agency has got a culture that people like working for, and we're very effective at what we do draw people from all over this country. And they are people that have a passion for fish and wildlife, and that's what they want to do for their career, and they wind up here. And so, and not every state gets to say that.
Right.
I mean, I like I said earlier, I do interact a lot with my fellow directors from not just the West, but from around the country. And we are, I wouldn't say, we're the only top-notch agency, but there's a handful, and we are definitely at the top of the heap there.
I think of, like, I can list off Oklahoma, Maine, Georgia, Florida, the Dakotas, Iowa. We could probably get to every state is represented in this agency without too much trouble.
I think you're probably right. Right. When we do the new employee orientation, I always ask, like, so, raise your hand if you're from another state, and it's
And then do you gloat that you're from Idaho too?
I not everybody may see that as an attribute, but yeah, to your point, Ben, the diversity of states that we do draw from here is remarkable, and that's the huge talent that we get. So all that's to say that the strength of this agency is absolutely the employees. If you look at the accomplishments of it, it's because of individuals and the brain power and the passion that they had and the innovation that they bring. And not every Fish and Wildlife agency gets to say that.
As a director, you talked a little bit about culture. How do you keep that culture up? How do you keep the marriage between our resources and what we do healthy?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? I think coming into this job, I felt like the agency was in really good shape, and my primary objective was not to break that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's. I think that recognizing that cultures do change, right, and times do change, and not everybody has to be a passionate hunter or angler to work in this agency and do an outstanding job. Yeah. So I think we get really good perspectives from people, well, in the Communications Bureau, for example, that did not grow up doing what we do, that can kind of provide that check to us and say, you're talking in a language here that I don't understand at all.
Yeah.
And so I think, or that message, may resonate with hunters, but it may come off a little sideways to somebody that doesn't hunt just because they don't understand exactly what you're saying. So there's big value to that for sure. But as much as it's not important that everybody, has 12 fishing rods and 6 rifles in this agency,
yeah.
I think it is important that everybody understands the value of hunting and fishing to conservation in this state and is able to serve the people that we primarily serve. So it's that balance, making sure that we hire the right people, but also recognizing that we serve all of Idaho.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That reminds me of a really funny story. When I was hired, Jim was on my hiring panel.
Oh.
Do you remember this, Roger? And one of the questions you guys asked me was like, well, what's your background in hunting and fishing? And I said, I fished, but I've been vegetarian for 2 years. And I'm newly into hunting. And I think the look on Jim's face, there was a deafening silence that came over the room. But it definitely shaped being new to the hunting culture in the last 6 years.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about my poker face there.
Oh, it was hilarious. Yeah.
But
I felt comfortable enough, though, to admit that I was,
There you go. And you got the job.
Yeah.
And it was a great hire.
Oh, thanks, Jim.
Yes, thank you.
So far.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me is the stewardship of the land that we are fortunate enough to live in. That whether I'll just go back to recreationalists too. Whether you hunt or fish, we all have to live and work together. But we are all looking at the same mountains. We're all traveling the same roads. And whether you like it or not, we're all tied together at some level. And Idaho Fishing Game is a piece of it. But we're all called to be good stewards of what we've been given, particularly in this context, the land.
I think our staff enjoys the resource too. It's not like we're just working for the resource.
Right.
You get the sense that whether you hunt or fish or don't, there's still a lot of folks around.
Oh yeah, Mondays in this agency are fascinating to listen to.
What everybody did over the weekend.
What everybody did where did you go hunt? Where you get the boat in the water?
Right.
We're taking off a day and we're going up north to go fishing.
Yep.
There's always a story.
Yep. And so I think in terms of how do you maintain that culture that has worked so effectively for us over the years, I think it's hearing what people have to say. As a director, I've tried hard to be approachable and to have more time with field staff to hear what's on their mind. Because we have 550 full-time employees in this agency, and while we do share a common culture, I think you have 550 different opinions on what ought to happen on one individual thing. So just recognizing that we need to hear from everybody, and people all need to feel like their voice is being listened to, and ultimately decisions get made. But it's like when we work with the public, just because the decision wasn't made in the way that you wanted it to go doesn't mean you weren't listened to.
Correct.
It just means that not everybody's going to like every decision.
I think another challenging thing is you've got 7 regions, and they're not all the same. They all have different challenges. They all have different areas of
ways of doing things.
Yeah, ways of doing things. They've got their own microcultures that, what works in Idaho Falls and in the Upper Snake may not work in the Magic Valley or over here.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, Idaho, one of the beauties and the strengths of Idaho is the diversity that we have geographically, from demographically, and from fish and wildlife resource standpoint. Very, very different challenges and opportunities in different regions and different approaches. And so, I think that's why it's one of the other things that has been kind of a hallmark of this agency is trying to get people to move around and experience different regions, so that you do have a sense of, this is the way we did it in the Panhandle region, and it's always worked here. But then going somewhere else and realizing, the challenges are very different, and how it was done in the Panhandle does not make any sense here at all. So that's important. We spend a lot of time trying to calibrate and make sure that if we're not being consistent, there's a good reason for it, right? Because I think the public can kind of wonder, because they move around, of course. Well, this is how it's done in X region. How come it's done entirely different here? Sometimes there's a really good reason for that, and sometimes it's just because, we've kind of let this go that direction, and maybe we do need to be a little bit more consistent.
We've talked quite a bit about staff. But can you talk a little bit about also the commission and how, what their role is, your relationship with the commission, how we work, and all the ways that we provide information for the commission, and how just that process works? Yeah,
absolutely. So we have 7 commissioners, 1 for each region, and by statute, not more than 4 of them can be from one political party. So there's balance created just by statute. And they are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And so they can serve up to 2 4-year terms. So they can serve 8 years. And we, right now, I will just say that we are, and they don't get paid, right? They get a per diem essentially, but this is, like we were talking before, heart work. It's heart work for them too. They do it because they have a passion for fish and wildlife resources, and I would probably say that almost none of them really fully appreciated what they were getting into when they signed up for the job. But to a person, they love it. Our existing commission absolutely loves it. They are fully engaged, and they work extremely well as a body. Like I say, they're not all far right Republicans or far left Democrats. They're a blend, and you really can't tell who's who.
No,
from listening to them.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of strength in that. So they largely put politics aside, because this is it's more about fish and wildlife conservation. And so their job is to ultimately administer the wildlife policy of the state. And they hire me. So I'm not a governor appointee. I'm hired by the commission.
Yeah.
And that's different in every state. There are a lot of different models. But I have 7 bosses essentially. And I would take 7 great bosses over one bad one all day long. And I have 7 great bosses. So a lot of my job is working with the commission. teeing up the quarterly commission meetings and the agendas. So that's where they set seasons and limits on fish and wildlife, obviously, but approve management plans and deal with other policy administrative type issues. So very, very functional group that we have right now. And yeah, I guess there's probably more to, well, there's a lot more to say about that.
And I don't know if it's a misconception, but I think it's worth pointing out that they're not politicians. They're, day-to-day people that have taken this job and been appointed by the governor.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's guys on there that one's a rancher. Currently, one's a rancher. We have somebody that's retired. We've got a couple people that are retired small business owners. A couple seed salesmen.
Forest Service employees.
BLM, actually. BLM. Right.
An old banker. There's quite a bit of diversity, background diversity in there.
I'm pretty sure you didn't mean to say he's an old banker. You just
No. Yeah. Well, I think if I was standing in front of him, he would also. Yeah. He used to be a
former
banker.
banker. Yes,
former banker.
That's what you meant to say. Yeah.
Who's maybe later in life.
Yeah, and so a couple other things to say about the commission. Like I say, they all didn't know what they're necessarily getting into, and at least all of the ones that I've ever worked with have an immense appreciation for the task, and all of them will say they had no idea of what all goes on in the Department of Fish and Game. And former Commissioner Greg Cameron, he was fond of saying that if people knew all that we know about fish and wildlife management and all that goes into it and how much we know about it and how well we do our job, the only complaint that somebody would ever have about Fish and Game is that they didn't draw the tag they wanted. And he did not come into the job thinking like that. I mean, he was a very, very avid, and still is, very, very avid hunter and angler, and he had his Fish and Game criticisms throughout his life as you or I would if we didn't work for the agency, or even if we do work for the agency. So for him to come in and after 8 years feel that, I mean, that just says a lot. And so these guys are all they are all more than happy to talk to hunting and fishing public and listen to them. And I think that is another strength of this agency, is that we are very accountable to the public through that process. If you look at some other large states, there's very, very little connection. I'm not going to name states, but if you picture a very, very heavily populated state, the connection between an outdoors person and the commission is vast, or is non-existent. I mean to say, the distance is vast, and yet here, anybody that wants to contact a commissioner is welcome to do that. Anybody that wants to contact Fish and Game staff is welcome to do that. And so I think that's something that I feel very, very good about, is the close connection that we have to the public.
I think that's one of those $1 million challenges we have in the communications department too, is how do we impart that on all of our residents as well.
Right. Yeah. You get into kind of the frustrations over the course of a career. And one of the things that is, it breaks my heart every time I hear it, is when you talk to some people and explain a situation or go to a public meeting and they say, "Oh, you guys do so much cool stuff and you know so much about this. You just really ought to tell the public." And it's like, yeah, I know, we try. Yeah. I don't need to tell you guys what a challenge it is when there's so much information out there. People's cup runneth over with information and people trying to feed them information, but yet knowing that there is a demand and a hunger for the information that we have. And I think that's, things like this podcast, I think the creative ways of reaching out and communicating with the public that the Communications Bureau has undertaken and that we've undertaken as a department is, again, it's one of those things that you're never there. It's just a continual challenge, and we always need to try to do better.
Yeah. Connor, are you ready to put Jim on the hot seat?
Uh-oh.
I think so. Yeah, we before we get to the rapid fire, we talked a lot about our own experiences out in the outdoors. But what are some of the highlights for you? Do you have any close calls or
you talked earlier about a best day.
and a worst day?
A best day, yeah. I've got so many best days. It really is tough, honestly. I was thinking like, what? I'll give you a couple of best days. As a fisheries manager in Idaho Falls, I would take fish. We'd pack fish up into high mountain lakes, small fry, and release them. And so when we'd do that, it was a good opportunity for me to take my family out as well. And there was one trip where we went in, packed into a remote lake in the Copper Basin. And so we were probably, 5 miles from the next nearest human being. And weather was good, so we slept outside under the stars. And I remember just waking up in the morning and kids and my wife were asleep, and the sun was just starting to hit this big cliff above the lake. And there was a golden eagle soaring over it. And I was just, it's one of those moments where you think, life can't be any better, right? Yeah. I mean, it was just, everything was good. And it was part of my job. So that certainly, I think I'll go to my grave thinking about that.
And you got to share it with your family.
And I got to share it with my family.
And impart those experiences.
Right.
That's wonderful.
Right. And maybe a little less fuzzy or sentimental of a best day was when I mentioned before that I used to have hound dogs, and so I got my own hound after I went out with a friend, and he'd kind of taught me how to do it, and so I had a pup and went out and found a lion track just with this one dog and another one of my friends, and long story short, we ended up catching the first lion that my dog caught, and It was in a cliff, and we kind of walked up, and there's this big crack in the rocks, and the dog's barking, and I look back and kind of shine a light back in there, and there's lion's eyes looking back out me about 10 yards away, 10 feet away, and that was very cool. We let the lion go, but it was just that was a really neat moment, because it was a new type of hunting for me. And to anybody that hunts with a dog, when the dog gets its first point and does well, or whatever it is, its first retrieve of a duck, it's just a neat moment to see that come together. So that was a great first day.
What's the worst thing you've ever smelled on the job?
No,
I love this question.
I didn't see that question coming. So
No, keep that one hidden.
I got one actually.
I'm sure.
He was in
20 years of fisheries.
Yeah, exactly. I was doing snorkel surveys up on Deep Creek in Boundary County, and just counting fish moving up the stream. And there was kind of this big tangle of root wad stuff, and there was something kind of fuzzy in front of me, stuck on these logs, a couple feet underwater. So I was trying to figure out what it was, and I waved my hand over it, and I'm still not sure what it was. I think it was a muskrat that was totally decomposed. So I waved my hand over it, and this cloud of fur and decomposing flesh just came right into my face. And so of course I jumped out of the water, but that was the most putrid smell. And
not even fisheries.
No.
It was a combination. That was a really good answer, Jim.
Yeah. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Any terrifying moments out in the woods, or near death or close call? Harrowing experiences? Not so much related to my job. That's okay.
Yeah. No, there was an experience when I was first learning to bow hunt, and it was a December elk hunt up near Moscow. And this was kind of a good life lesson for me. But I was following some elk, and long story short, I got turned around and started walking down a drainage, and it got dark. This is December, so it gets dark about 4 o'clock up there. So it's getting dark, and I'm walking down this drainage, and realizing that I'm not getting closer to my truck, realizing that, okay, I'm not sure where I am. So I kept walking, and this is the lesson part. Feeling kind of like the young, indestructible person that doesn't really need to prepare. I did not. I had a flashlight, and the batteries were about dead, I had a map, but it wasn't very good. And this was before GPSs, right? And so
What's a map?
yeah, right.
MapQuest.
Oh,
So I'm walking down this forest road, and it's dark, and so I'm now using my lighter because my flashlight died to read the sign number on this forest road, and then look on my map, and I realize, okay, I'm a drainage over going the wrong direction. So I ended up walking about 6 miles, and then and I hit a highway. It's probably like 11 o'clock at night by this time, and nobody gave me a ride. So then I walked into the town of Beauville, which is another mile, and I'm covered with snow, and I got my bow in my hand. I walk into a bar. Everybody looks at me, and I said, I got lost. I was out hunting, and somebody says like the nastiest thing to me that it was. I won't repeat it, but he basically expressed that he really didn't care.
well, I just heard it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was harrowing. And then the story goes on. I ended up.
He ended up completing the Beauville run.
Yeah, right. No, a guy said, well, he took pity on me, and he said, come on, I'll give you a ride out to your truck. So we go out to the parking lot, and he's got a log truck. So I hop into his logging truck, and he gives me a ride back out to my truck. So there are good people there too.
Yeah. At least one.
At least one, yeah.
Last story. What's the biggest deer or elk you've ever shot? And what's the story associated with it?
Well, bow hunting, my biggest elk was a good bull. It was close to 330 if you're into scoring. This is up in the Panhandle, and Joe, my long time hunting buddy, the one that got me into this thing in the first place, we always hunt together, and so he was calling for me, and it's one of those. Elk hunting is something that when it works out, it's like the easiest thing. It's like that. There was nothing to that. Why can't I do this all the time?
Archery elk specifically, or
archery. Yeah. So this bull came. It couldn't have gone better. Just walked and stopped about 15 yards from me and didn't see me, and so made a good shot, and that was it. So not a great story, but it was at the time it was. I was on cloud nine, and so I've had a lot of good archery elk stories.
Yeah.
A lot of them ended in great success, and lots of close encounters, and yeah.
That reminds me of, I don't know, I can't speak for you, Bieri, but my favorite Jim's moment was when we shot that video last year up at the, we were just up in the foothills.
Yeah.
And we just got done filming, and then you go to your car and take out your bow. And it reminded me of like that George Bush video where he's like giving a press conference, and he goes, "Now watch this drive," because then Jim set up a little archery target and just started shooting his bow.
Yep.
Like,
got to get the reps in.
Yep. I was like, okay,
right.
We'll see you, Jim.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. Do you need help or no? He was
No, he was just in the zone, showing off.
Yeah. Well, see you, Jim.
We're gonna try something new because this is Jim. We're right. I don't know when this is gonna come out. Probably the end of March, but we're celebrating our first year of doing the podcast, and so that's why we wanted to have you on as our special guest. And Roger had a good idea. Speaking of putting,
is that why Roger's here?
Yeah.
He's been waiting patiently for this. But we had kind of a fun idea. We're gonna try a rapid fire with you. We're gonna throw questions at you. We promise they're safe. Some of them are going to be a little kooky. And we're going to time it, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes or so. If you don't feel it comfortable or have an answer that comes to you, you can say pass.
Okay.
But should we try it?
Yeah, go.
All right. What's your favorite wild game meat to eat?
Chinook salmon.
All right. Would you rather fly on the back of a peregrine falcon or ride the back of a kokanee?
Peregrine falcon. Yeah, definitely. I can swim. I can't fly.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Fly rod or spin rod?
Fly rod, but I like them both.
Do you take the elevator or do you take the stairs?
Stairs.
Ooh. Fried fish or grilled fish?
Grilled.
Would you rather be mauled by a grizzly bear or shish kebabbed by an elk antler?
Oh, man. It sounds like the smell of a grizzly bear mauling is not pleasant, so I'd take the elk antler.
Oh, you know from experience?
I've never thought about that
No,
question
but-
through Smell.
Yeah, no. When you hear stories, people always talk about the stench.
Yeah, the
I mean,
breath.
I wouldn't like the teeth either, of course.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
What's the first animal you harvested?
Well, so like little kid with a BB gun type thing. I know this is supposed to be rapid fire. First legal animal I harvested
Yep.
as a hunter was a mourning dove.
Oh,
Yeah. In fact, it was the
not
first
a squirrel with a BB gun.
Well, that's the caveat. There.
have you eaten squirrel?
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
Squirrel gravy. Connor's
Yeah, that's
got
my
a
favorite.
recipe.
1 week to hunt any game animal in Idaho. What animal and why?
Bighorn sheep, never done it, and probably never will. But if I could, I would.
You think it'd take you a week to get one?
I suspect. Yeah.
This is a Roger question. Which are the better big game animal, white-tailed deer or mule deer?
Oh wow, I'm kind of a whitey guy.
Okay.
He's from Northern Idaho.
Yeah, I know.
Remember?
Yeah.
You're leaving to go on a hunting trip and pack your cooler. What kind of sandwich and what kind of beverage?
Yeah, I'll pass. Just 'cause I'm blanking. I'd not. I'll eat anything. Yeah.
You're not a Diet Coke person or a
Not really.
Sprite.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty easy. So yeah.
Water and peanut butter and jelly.
Every time I go to Subway, it's a tuna sandwich though. So
Okay.
everybody's like, "Are you kidding me?"
Do you pack one of those in your hunting pack?
No.
Talk about the worst thing you've ever smelled on a hunting trip. Last question. Would you rather have elk antlers or a beaver tail
To eat to do what with?
on your body?
On your body.
Oh, I think it'd be kind of cool to have a beaver tail.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Shoot.
He did.
Under 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, thank you. This will be a really special episode. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and provide a lot of insight into what you do.
I hope so. Yeah.
Roger and Bieri, do you guys have any final burning questions for Jim?
No. We've hit him. We've got it all.
Is there anything we forgot to ask you, Jim?
Oh, there's probably some things that you
Well, the nice thing is we can always do this.
That's true.
Yeah. It was fun. My pleasure. Happy to do it. I think this is.
Thanks for taking the time to come all the way down here
Yeah.
to sit down with us.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
You know where I live. So.
Yeah.
All right. No, thanks
Jim.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.